Hey everyone, before we get into today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more stories like this one. A gentle knock broke the stillness of the afternoon. Outside, the lake glimmered under a pale winter sky, its surface perfectly calm, framed by a line of bare birches guarding the edge of the yard. When I opened the door, my father stood there, confident, collected, as if he'd come bearing good news. The sharp scent of his cologne sliced through the crisp air, mixing uneasily with the faint smoke drifting from my fireplace. He stepped in without waiting for an invitation, his movements polished, but not steady. His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope, which he laid on the kitchen table like it was a winning lottery ticket. A crisp cashier's check slid halfway out, $12,000. There, he said, lowering himself into the chair across from me. Enough to get you started somewhere new. Portland, maybe Boston. The cottage is sold. $3 million in cash. Best decision, really. I didn't move. My eyes stayed fixed on the check, my fingers brushing the small steel, key hanging from the cord around my neck. A key that no longer opened anything, yet carried everything I still cared about. You sold the cottage, I said quietly. He smiled too quickly. You've been too busy to handle it. I took care of things. I spared you the hassle. I let him talk. His voice filled the space he thought he owned, mistaking my silence for agreement. But he didn't realize I had already rewritten how this story would end, because it hadn't started with the envelope on my table. It began years earlier, in the dead of winter, when I stood inside the Rockland courthouse at 24, my mother gone, my world freshly rearranged by a judge's gavel. The lakeside cottage in mid-coast Maine became mine. Not something I'd asked for, but a parting gift written in her will. My father had already been drifting by then, chasing get-rich-quick ideas and half-truths that never lasted. To him, the cottage was just a dollar sign waiting to be cashed. To me, it was the one place that still felt real. The house was crumbling when I moved in, shingles curled from neglect, windows swollen with rot, floors soft where leaks had gone unnoticed for years. By day, I worked in Camden, hauling lumber, crunching numbers, and by night, I rebuilt the house piece by piece. Every nail, every beam was a conversation with my mother. Every fixed window a quiet promise I'd keep what she left me safe. She never said outright that the cottage was supposed to be my anchor, but her name on that deed told me enough. It was something beyond the reach of debts, schemes, or betrayal. My father never stopped calling. First, he needed small amounts, 500 here, 1,000 there. Then it was thousands at a time. Truck repairs, house flips, short-term loans. Each request felt heavier, and each time, I convinced myself I could help, that I could steady him if I just kept control of the money. But control has its cost. Every dollar I sent was another quiet act of denial, pretending not to see what was really happening. Then one night, Owen called. His voice carried that uneasy mix of loyalty and dread. He'd been at a bar near Rockport Marina, half listening to the noise until my father's voice cut through it. Ronan had been bragging loudly, boasting that the lake house would be sold within days, the deal practically sealed. He laughed, saying I was too naive to notice a signature slipped under my nose. That laughter hit me like ice. By morning, I was sitting in Claire Lennon's office in Rockland, a lawyer I'd been told about years ago, but never needed until that moment. I told her everything, the check, the forged authority, Owen's warning, the years of quiet manipulation. Claire didn't interrupt. She just wrote, focused, precise. When I finished, she looked up and said calmly, he's already forged a power of attorney. If we don't act, the county could record a sale within days. My hand shook as I signed the papers she laid out. She placed the cottage into an irrevocable trust, my name set in stone as both trustee and lifetime beneficiary. Each signature felt like I was carving my mother's will into granite. This wasn't just inheritance anymore, it was armor. Claire also filed a fraud alert affidavit with the Knox County Registry, making sure no forged deed could slide through unnoticed. When I left her office that evening, the sharp Rockland air felt different, colder, but clearer. I finally felt the weight shift. Still, protection needed proof. I installed small cameras around the cottage, one above the front door, one in the kitchen rafters, another in the study where my father liked to rummage through papers. Tiny red lights blinked back at me, steady, patient, alive. Claire connected me with a handwriting expert from Portland who compared the forged documents to my real ones, old tax forms, my mother's will, insurance papers. The forgery was obvious. The pressure was uneven, the lines hesitant, someone imitating what they'd never truly known. Meanwhile, Claire traced the supposed buyer. The trail led straight to a familiar name, one of my father's poker friends from Warren. The money had already started moving, small deposits, quick withdrawals, disappearing balances. It was a scam built on shifting sand. Then came the call from Marta Blair at the registry. She had spotted a freshly submitted packet that didn't look right. Her steady voice was calm but firm. Don't worry. We're not letting this one slip through. For the first time, I believed her. Owen offered to stay, to help watch the house, or just sit through the waiting with me. I told him no. Control was safer than company. I needed to handle this myself. His disappointment lingered in the silence after he left, but I pushed it aside. Because the moment that check hit my table, I already knew what he'd taken and what he couldn't. The lake still waited outside, untouched by his schemes. My mother's cottage, my mother's will, wasn't something he could sell. Not anymore. The waterfront restaurant shimmered in the evening light, its wide glass windows reflecting the breakwater and the soft orange glow of dusk. My father had chosen the place, clearly savoring the symbolism of victory. When I arrived, he was already seated, wine chilling in an ice bucket, menus positioned with theatrical care. Sit, Sable, he greeted, smiling as if this were a reunion rather than a reckoning. Tonight's about farewells and fresh starts. You'll see. I sat across from him, pressing the linen napkin into my lap to hide the slight tremor in my hands. He poured 2 glasses of wine, raising his in a toast. To your freedom, he declared proudly. No more burden, no more debt. I've lifted that weight. Our glasses touched, but I didn't drink. The refusal was subtle enough that he didn't notice, or chose not to. He leaned back, confidence radiating off him. You should thank me, he said. 3 million's a good deal. That 12,000 I've set aside will keep you comfortable. His words landed like ice water. Gratitude. For erasing my name from my mother's house? I managed a faint smile that he mistook for surrender. Dinner arrived, quiet and elegant. Outside, the lighthouse blinked steadily as the tide rolled in. Halfway through the meal, Claire appeared at the door. Her surprise was feigned when she spotted me, her smile perfectly measured. Mind if I join? She asked. My father's brows lifted, but he waved her over, still smug enough to think he was in control. As plates were cleared, he loosened up, perhaps emboldened by wine and arrogance. You know, he said, his tone softening, your mother always favored you. That house should have been mine. I fixed it, paid the taxes, kept it standing while she wasted sentiment on old wood. The judge handed it to you like I didn't exist. I watched him closely, realizing that selling the cottage wasn't just about money. It was about revenge. My mother's will had wounded his pride, and he wanted to rewrite the ending she'd left behind. Claire met my gaze, a flicker of intent passing between us. Funny timing, she said casually. I was at the registry this week, and I noticed a few new filings under your name. His fork stopped midair. What filings? Claire slid a folder across the table. Inside were freshly stamped trust documents, dated 3 days before his little visit to my property. The cottage, she said smoothly, is secured under an irrevocable trust with Sable as sole beneficiary. Anything you filed after that isn't worth the paper it's on. He turned the pages, color draining from his face. You can't do this. I had a buyer. Claire's voice didn't waver. That buyer's linked to a shell account in Warren, the same one tied to your poker buddy. No money ever hit escrow. That's fraud, Ronan. He slammed the folder shut, trembling with rage. I built that place. I paid for it when your mother couldn't. Sable owes me. The word, burned through me. I steadied my voice. I don't owe you theft. He leaned closer, desperation leaking through the cracks of his anger. You don't understand. I'm drowning. Thomas and Linders, they're after me. I can't even walk the harbor without someone breathing down my neck. Selling that house was my only way out. Claire's expression hardened. Forging your daughter's signature and falsifying documents, that's fraud, theft by deception, and financial exploitation. The DA would have enough to charge you tomorrow. For a moment, his defiance faltered. His gaze shifted toward the lighthouse, its light cutting through the darkness like a metronome. Then his jaw tightened. So what now? You'll have me arrested? Not yet, Claire replied. But you're out of time, Ronan. The only question is how you want this to end. The next morning, I met Claire again at her office overlooking Rockland's quiet shoreline. The same folder lay open between us, flagged with yellow tabs. What do you want to do? She asked gently. I don't want this hidden, I said. But I also don't want to see him behind bars, if there's another way. She nodded and began drafting a civil agreement. Restitution, counseling, and a binding covenant. Ronan would repay what he could, stay away from me and the cottage, and forfeit any claim to it. Violation meant immediate civil and criminal action. When I told Owen, my cousin, over coffee in Camden, he frowned. This will destroy him. He'll say we're tearing him apart. I met his eyes, tired but resolute. Maybe we are. But silence would do worse. He nodded slowly. If this protects you, I'm with you. Back at the cottage, I changed the locks, new steel gleaming against weathered wood. Each twist of the wrench felt like reclaiming something real. I walked along the shoreline where erosion had begun to creep and planted native grasses to hold the soil. Even the land deserved to heal. Inside, I hung 2 frames above the mantel. My mother's deed in her delicate handwriting and the trust certificate with Claire's seal. They stood as proof that endurance, not blood, had preserved this place. Ronan tried calling Owen later, his words circling the same tired plea about family and loyalty. But Owen stood firm, directing him to Claire. For the first time, I felt both relief and grief in equal measure. At my next meeting with Claire, I confessed quietly. The more I secure things, the lonelier it feels. I think if I control every detail, nothing can hurt me, but it also keeps everyone out. She closed the file softly. Safety matters, she said. But if you never open the door, you'll mistake solitude for peace. Her words lingered as summer faded into fall. Camden filled with tourists and music again, the world spinning on as if nothing had fractured. Meanwhile, Ronan made his restitution payments, small, regular deposits from his boat repair work. I kept each receipt, not from vengeance but from a need for order. Eventually, I decided to turn that vigilance outward. Through a local land trust, I started a small grant program for victims of property fraud. Stories poured in, neighbors tricked, signatures forged, families divided. For once, my caution had built something beyond defense. Then a letter arrived, written in my father's sharp, uneven script. It wasn't an apology, just a request to see the cottage one last time from the road. I sat on the granite steps, the lake glimmering before me, and read his words twice. After several days, I agreed. One supervised visit, nothing more. When he came, he stood at the gravel shoulder, eyes on the roof line, the chimney, the birches moving in the wind. He said nothing, and that silence, unlike all his excuses, felt like the closest thing to respect he could manage. By September, I finally understood that peace didn't mean reconciliation. It meant boundaries. A year later, Claire's reports showed steady progress, partial repayments, counseling completed. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it established something like balance. On the mantel, I built a small shadow box. Inside, the cottage key I once wore around my neck, the stamp trust certificate, and a photograph my mother had taken the summer before she died. Together, they told a story of what was nearly lost and what I had reclaimed. I stepped back and looked at it. The key no longer needed to rest against my skin. It belonged behind glass now, part of the past, but preserved with care. Outside, the birches swayed, their reflections rippling across the water. Somewhere beyond the gate, my father's shadow still existed, but it no longer crossed the threshold. The line was mine to keep.